Hey Jess, how are you? Good to see you. You've been busy, right? How's it all going with yours? What's it stand for again?
So YOS stands for Your Own Solution. We encourage everyone to take small and manageable steps to reduce their own waste footprint. Our website, YOS, it lists food retailers that accept BYO containers. So as a consumer, you can bring your own reusable container the next time you go get takeaway. So far, it's been going really well. We've been approaching a lot of food retailers in Sydney, but we've also been approached by other food retailers across Australia. Well, as you know, there's only Melinda and I, so we can't exactly run around the country signing people up. So yeah, it's going really well. Currently, we've got labels for food retailers in both English and Chinese, and I think our next step is actually to print them in different languages to bring together different cultures.
Can I still reject the container, even though I've signed up for yours? Customer brings in a container, can I reject it?
Well, we have been asked a few main questions by food retailers. The main concern is with respect to hygiene and whether, as a food retailer, by accepting customers' own reusable container, that puts them in breach of any New South Wales or any kind of food regulation. We've been asked by retailers if they have to accept containers. What if someone brings one that's dirty? Or if someone gets sick, then does that increase their liability? So there are a few sort of legal questions that are of concern.
This sounds a lot like Keep Cut. It sounds like in the food space that you're leading the way. What are you hoping to get out of this movement?
With YOS, what we're trying to do is to actually allow everyone to participate without having to purchase anything if you don't want to. I mean, you will have people who feel that they want to just only bring glass containers or the metal containers or whatnot, but that's not a necessity. The only requirement is that your container is clean. So if you've already got containers at home, there's no cost to participating. It's just bring a container.
So Liz, it's interesting to hear what Jess has had to say. What do you think about the situation? A lot of customers, a lot of businesses might say, no, I can't do this. New South Wales Health won't let me.
My understanding is that there's no New South Wales health regulation or legislation which prevents a retailer from accepting somebody's takeaway container as a means of taking food. And that if anything, that is a business decision of that particular retailer. New South Wales Food Authority even provides information on its website about how people are allowed to bring their own container to take away food, and that as long as that container is clean and dry, that there's nothing that prevents the retailer from being satisfied that that's a means by which that food can be taken away. Once the food is taken away from the premises, it really is up to the consumer to adhere to safe food storage and consumption, refrigerating if you need to refrigerate, and so on. But until that point, it's totally safe and open to both the retailer and the consumer to explore that type of initiative.
So Liz, what's your view of if you were to accept these reusable containers, does it exempt you from food and safety and health regulations?
Ultimately, whether somebody wants to take something away in their own container doesn't absolve or exempt any cafe or restaurant from adhering to the food safety standards that are relevant to them. That's either in the preparation of food or even in putting the food into that container. Another common sense approach that if it falls on the ground, you don't put it in the container, and you still have to adhere by the usual standards of food prep.
From a customer's perspective, if I were to bring my own container and I somehow fall ill, do I lose my right to sue all of a sudden by doing that? Do I have rights?
Then comes down to looking at the balance of probabilities, and what's relevant in that type of consideration is whether it can be established that a particular infection or illness as a result of food poisoning is either attributable to the food that's been consumed or attributable to the container that it's been in. We've all heard of really horror cases where people have been profoundly disabled by sometimes salmonella or derivatives of salmonella type illnesses. And one of the biggest ones in New South Wales has been the incident of the KFC salmonella case in 2009 and 2012, where a young girl was profoundly disabled by consuming food that hadn't been prepared properly. And that was one of the findings from that case, is that it was more likely than not that particular retailer hadn't adhered to safe food practices, and that the liability for that particular illness was so strongly attributed to the retailer because there was no other source of the illness that could be attributed to what had happened to that young woman. So I think it comes back to those considerations of where you can establish that the illness has come from. And I would think that more often than not, in cases of food poisoning, that's going to be attributed to the food and not the container. But again, it's a case-by-case basis, and it's one of those things that gets explored.
So Sam, you've heard what Liz has had to say about the situation with liability on the part of a restaurant here. What do you think of the situation? If I were to bring my own container, I take food away and I feel drastically ill, do I lose my right to sue just because I brought my own container?
You don't lose your rights simply by bringing your own container. I suppose people have in mind the idea of a waiver, you waiving your rights, but your rights exist under both what we would call a common law claim or a negligence claim, but also under the Australian consumer law. And the Australian consumer law is a guarantee as to the quality of the products. It has to be of merchantable quality. That guarantee can't be excluded by contract law. In terms of negligence, well, there's this question of causation. So if the food has caused your illness, that doesn't change whether it's your container or not. If it's your container that's caused the illness, well, you're going to lose that container, that argument anyway. Nothing changes from that. But there is a question of voluntary assumption of risk. Are you voluntarily taking on that risk? But what risk are you taking on? That's the risk that your container is dirty and unsafe and unhygienic. You're not taking on the risk, as Liz points out. It doesn't absolve the restaurant provider from doing safe practices. If their practices are unsafe and cause you to be sick, well, you've lost nothing.
This is another interesting question, isn't it? So, do you have an obligation as the restaurant owner or the registered owner of the business to clean my container when I bring it in?
This goes back to this question of duty. What is my duty of care? What am I obliged to do, in other words? So to say to me that as a restaurant I have a positive obligation, I have to clean your container, is just absurd. There's nothing in the law as far as I'm aware that requires that of anyone. If it's dirty, don't serve it. Just if it looks clean, well, go ahead. As far as I'm aware, but as long as your own safe food practices are safe and that it looks clean, well, if it is dirty, well, that's someone else's responsibility. But if you take on that obligation of cleaning that, well, then you're taking an obligation to make sure that's cleaned properly. So the safer option would simply be to refuse to take the container if you weren't satisfied it was clean.
Well, I suppose if I'm feeling hungry today, and if I feel like going to my local Thai takeaway, I will take maybe this and this reusable containers instead of getting plastic takeaway containers. I reckon I might just be all right. I think the restaurant owner will be okay, and I think I'll be okay. Got nothing really too much to worry about. Probably give it a go. Maybe save the planet in the process.